and welcome to UZREPORT World News. My name is Barna Nazarzoda. The President of Uzbekistan addressed the nation on Wednesday, just 3 days after Uzbekistan reported its first confirmed case of novel coronavirus. As of Thursday, March 19, the number of confirmed COVID-19 cases in Uzbekistan has reached 23.
Around 220,000 people globally have been infected with COVID-19, while the death toll has climbed to almost 9,000. More than 85,000 patients have recovered so far. The World Health Organization declared the rapidly spreading coronavirus outbreak a pandemic, acknowledging the virus will likely spread to all countries on the globe. Unfortunately, this infection disease has also affected Uzbekistan, Mirziyoyev said. In the early stage of an epidemic, a special national commission chaired by the Prime Minister Aripov was set up. So far, some 6,000 people have been quarantined. On Monday 16, the government of Uzbekistan banned all kinds of mass events, including Nowruz celebrations, and announced closure of all the educational establishments across the country. The epidemiological situation analysis is carried out on the basis of hourly and daily updates received from across the country. Several charter flights have been arranged to take Uzbek citizens stranded in foreign countries home. All cross-border traffic has been restricted, except for cargo and freight transport operations. President Shavkat Mirziyoyev has assured the nation that the situation is under the complete control of the government. Regardless of religion, nationality and language, we are all united in this, and I am sure that we will overcome all difficulties. For that, we all must first and foremost follow the recommendations of doctors, strictly abide by the rules of personal hygiene and sanitation. Visiting a doctor's office for a checkup and not concealing symptoms can be the most effective measure to prevent the disease. He also mentioned measures are being taken against consumer goods price hikes. Tax Committee, Prosecutor's Office and all other state bodies are involved into this process. The country has sufficient reserves and there is no reason to panic, he said. The main trading partners of Uzbekistan are suffering from currency depreciation. The situation in the global oil market leaves much to be desired, and all of the above will undoubtedly affect Uzbekistan's economy as well. The profit gained from gas export may dip and foreign exchange earnings will see reduction. Tourism is another major sector that is feeling negative consequences. All of this will affect the overall GDP and economic growth. Nevertheless, measures that will be implemented may to some extent ease the consequences. The uninterrupted operation of key branches of the economy is of particular importance, Mirziyoyev said.
With 22 verified cases so far, Afghanistan is still among the countries with a relatively low rate of coronavirus cases. Many of those who have tested positive for the virus have returned from Iran, which has been badly hit by the pandemic. Iran's death toll from the novel virus climbed to 1,135, with 147 new deaths in the past 24 hours. A health ministry official told State TV on Wednesday, adding that the total number of infected people across the country had reached 17,361. Meanwhile, Pakistan confirmed its first coronavirus-related death on Wednesday, as the number of infections climbed to almost 300 in the past 48 hours. The Asian Development Bank announced on Wednesday a $6.5 billion initial package to address the immediate needs of its developing member countries as they respond to the novel coronavirus pandemic. According to ADB President Masatsugu Asakawa, this pandemic has become a major global crisis and it requires forceful action at national, regional and global levels.
Masatsugu Asakawa said that the package will help to protect the poor, the vulnerable and wider populations across the region, and to ensure economies will rebound as swiftly as possible. ADB stands ready to provide further financial assistance and policy advice down the road whenever the situation warrants, Mr. Asakawa stressed. The initial package includes approximately $3.6 billion in sovereign operations for a range of responses to the health and economic consequences of the pandemic and $1.6 billion in non-sovereign operations for micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, domestic and regional trade. ADB will also mobilize about $1 billion in concessional resources through reallocations from ongoing projects and assessing possible needs for contingencies. ADB will make available $40 million in technical assistance and quick disbursing grants.
On March 17, the U.S. Embassy handed over personal protective equipment to the Agency for Sanitary and Epidemiological Well-being of Uzbekistan to prepare for the potential spread of the novel coronavirus disease, COVID-19. The U.S. Agency for International Development has allocated additional financing from its Emergency Reserve Fund for contagious infectious diseases to countries affected by coronavirus or at risk of its spread, including Uzbekistan. U.S. Ambassador to Uzbekistan Daniel Rosenblum, praising the country's preparedness Preparedness announced that this USAID assistance will further support Uzbekistan to prepare and respond to COVID-19. The donation includes 10,000 examination gloves, 10,200 masks, 1,400 isolation gowns, and 200 protective goggles. This equipment will be distributed to regional centers and cities across Uzbekistan. According to the latest findings of the World Cost of Living Survey compiled by the Economist Intelligence Unit, Uzbekistan's capital Tashkent ranked 132nd and remaining amongst the world's top 10 cheapest cities to live in. Compared to last year, Tashkent fell by one position, which according to the experts is the effect of currency devaluation that began in 2017. Neighboring Kazakhstan's Almaty was ranked third cheapest city in the world. Shavkat Mirziyoyev has approved the institution of fines for violating the new law restricting the size of weddings. In accordance with the latest law, family celebrations, ceremonies and rituals that are found to be in violation of the regulations require the violating member of the public to pay a fine worth up to $230. The non-compliance by an official of marriage license bureau, cafes and restaurants with the requirements for the wedding and family celebrations will see a fine of up to $700. A fine of $1,170 is imposed for repeated violation. According to recent amendments into Administrative Responsibility Code of Uzbekistan, which came into force on March 18, a 30% discount will now be offered for early payment of fines. In other words, the administrative violator will have to voluntarily pay 70% of the fine within 15 days to be relieved of the obligation to pay the whole amount.
South Korea's president on Thursday pledged $39 billion in emergency financing for small businesses, along with other stimulus measures to help shore up its economy battered by the coronavirus outbreak. The package is the latest in a string of steps Seoul has taken in recent days in a bid to curb pressure on Asia's fourth largest economy, including an interest rate cut, an extra $9.12 billion budget and more dollar supplies. The government will issue loan guarantees for struggling small businesses with less than $78,000 in annual revenue to ensure companies can easily and cheaply access credit. Local commercial banks and savings banks will also allow loans to be rolled over for small businesses if they cannot afford to pay off the loan when it is due. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reported 152 new cases on Thursday, taking the country's total infections to 8,565.
The United States has sent its 2 military hospital ships to the New York Harbor and the West Coast as cases of the fast-spreading coronavirus rose to more than 7,000 and deaths climbed to more than 100 in the U.S., and as the Trump administration took unprecedented measures to battle the outbreak.
We'll be invoking the Defense Production Act.
On Wednesday, President Trump took the extraordinary step of putting in place a law that will allow the government to speed production of masks, respirators, ventilators, and other equipment needs. And after initially downplaying the virus,
Like a miracle, it will disappear.
Trump said the unfolding crisis had basically made him a wartime president.
Every generation of Americans has been called to make shared sacrifices for the good of the nation. In World War II, young people in their teenage years volunteered to fight. They wanted to fight so badly because they love our country. And now it's our time. We must sacrifice together because we are all in this together and we'll come through together.
Trump's coronavirus response coordinator on Wednesday said younger people in France and Italy are falling seriously ill from the virus, a worrying development that suggests young adults are more susceptible to becoming sick than previously thought.
It may have been that the millennial generation, our largest generation, our future generation, that will carry us through for the next multiple decades. There may be disproportional number of infections among that group. And so even if it's a rare occurrence, it may be seen more frequently in that group.
You are being told not to go out. You are being told not to go out.
The governor of Nevada, home to Las Vegas, another hotspot for tourists, effectively shut down the entire leisure industry overnight. The sector employs 355,000 people, a quarter of all jobs in the state. And in Detroit, the nation's largest automakers, GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler, said they will temporarily shut down their U.S. plants to help stop the spread of the coronavirus, bowing to pressure from the union representing about 150,000 hourly workers.
Britain faces a major problem with a shortage of ventilators that will be needed to treat critically ill patients suffering from coronavirus after it failed to invest enough in intensive care equipment, a leading ventilator manufacturer said on Wednesday.
Yes, I think England will have quite a major problem because they are not well equipped with these ventilators and intensive care station, and there will be a big problem.
Ventilators running in the thousands of dollars per unit are used to help people with respiratory difficulties to breathe. They are high-tech versions of the iron lungs that kept people alive into the 50s during fierce polio epidemics. Worldwide, the devices have become shorthand for the rapid advance of the disease and the desperation of officials who fear their stocks are inadequate. Last week, Hamilton Medical shipped 400 ventilators to Italy, whose intensive care units have been overwhelmed by more than 35,000 new cases of the rapidly spreading virus and almost 3,000 deaths. About 50% of those with coronavirus in Italy accepted into intensive care units are dying, compared with typical mortality rates of 12% to 16% in such times.
A restaurant trade group is asking the White House and lawmakers for a $455 billion aid package, warning the industry could shed roughly half of its nearly 16 million jobs and take a huge sales hit as restaurants and bars are forced to close or change how they operate in response to the coronavirus outbreak. The National Restaurant Association on Wednesday warned that restaurants could suffer a $225 billion loss in the next 3 months due to the pandemic. Their request includes the creation of a nearly $150 billion recovery fund to provide liquidity to operators, and roughly $300 billion more in insurance, loans, and block grants. Their plea comes as Union Square Hospitality Group, one of the nation's most prestigious restaurant companies, owned by Danny Meyer, laid off 2,000 employees on Wednesday, according to the New York Times. That represents about 80% of the company's total staff.
And this was our last report. Thanks for watching and goodbye.